Welcome to Pages and People, an inside look at Baker Bookhouse. Delve into the heart of Christian literature and community with us. From its origins in 1939, Baker Bookhouse in Grand Rapids, Michigan has been a beacon of inspiration. Explore theological depth, spiritual growth, and Christian living through engaging author events, thought-provoking publications, and a vibrant online presence. Join us as we uncover the stories behind the books and the voices shaping the pages. Welcome to Pages and People, an inside look at Baker Bookhouse. Let's explore together.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Pages and People, episode 10. I'm Pete McGowan, cafe manager here at the bookstore, and we're going to dive right into two stories that bring laughter, honesty, and deep reflection. We have two authors today. First up is Jen Turano, whose newest release, A Lesson in Propriety, blends humor, wit, and heart as she shares how her quirky characters come to life and how joy and faith shape her writing process. Then we turn to Katie Powner, author of When the Road Comes Home, a story that meets readers right where brokenness and grace collide. It's about second chances, forgiveness, and the hard but beautiful work of coming home again. Both A Lesson in Propriety and When the Road Comes Home are 30% off right now at bakerbookhouse.com. Let's turn to these authors and enjoy the conversations Sue and Chris bring us. Thanks for tuning in.
Chris and I are here with Jen Turano to talk with her about her latest book, A Lesson in Propriety. Jen, welcome to Pages and People. We're so excited to have you with us today.
Thank you for having me. I always love doing these podcasts.
Well, I feel like I'm a newbie to the conversation, but Jen, I just totally enjoyed reading your book. Oh my, what a ride. So much great humor, and it just clips right along. I'm so excited to hear more about what went into this book. So, Chris and I like to start off with just asking, how did this story come about for you? I know you've been writing for a long time.
I have been writing for a long time, and I've been wanting to do an academy for young ladies for a long time. But because it's me, I write quirky takes on normal stories. So I needed something different for an academy. I didn't want to just start off with, there's a headmistress of an established academy, and it was just the status quo, right? But I couldn't figure it out. Like for years, I couldn't figure it out. I have a box where I keep ideas that I just throw in. Normally when I'm doing research, I'll run across something and I'll throw it into this box. And that kept coming up. When I go to put in a proposal for a new series, I open the box, I look through them, and then I'm like, I haven't figured out the academy one. So I was with some girlfriends from high school. There were 9 of us, and I'm still super close to all these girls today. They're just a riot. And we were discussing cartoon shows on Saturday mornings. And, there were like 2 stations, right? And everybody were like, cartoons were only on Saturday morning. Well, mine was Scooby-Doo. I love Scooby-Doo. So as soon as someone started talking about Scooby-Doo, I was like, oh, that might solve my Academy for Ladies problems. And like my friends think I've lost my mind, right? Because all of a sudden I just get up and walk out of the room, and I come back with like Post-it notes, and I'm writing things down. And I'm like, no, this would work. But then I'm like, well, okay, but I don't want it already established. So then I thought, I'm always connected to the New York 400, which is high society in New York City during the Gilded Age. And it was called the New York 400 because Ward McAllister got together with Carolyn Astor, and they decided who was going to be admitted into society and who was going to be kept out, because there was a lot of what they called nouveau riche during that time because of the Industrial Revolution. Mm-hmm. Well, they didn't want to be running around with the riffraff, as they thought of them. So they came up with this, and Ward McAllister had said at one point there are only 400 people worthy of being admitted into society. Well, and just as a little Gilded Age tidbit, that really came about because Carolyn Astor, she did live on Fifth Avenue at that time, but she lived on the end away from like where Alva Vanderbilt built this huge mansion. So she lived in a brownstone, and it was very tasteful, very reserved. And the ballroom could only hold 400 people. So that's really where the whole New York 400, how it came to be. But I'm known to write all of my stories. They have some connection to the New York 400. I've actually heard I've been branded the Gilded Girl. So in keeping with the Gilded Girl theme, I said, well, okay, what would happen if I would have a heroine who was a member of the New York 400? She's very well established within society, and she's one of the most prim and proper women, ladies in the 400, and she's engaged, and all of a sudden her fortune disappears. So that's how it started. So the poor Drusilla, she had gone to the Sherwood Academy for Young Ladies for years, and she finds, and she discovers that, that perhaps she's too proper. And she finds that out, as you know, at the beginning of the story, where she's getting tossed over by her scoundrel of a fiance, who is tossing her over because not only has her father died, but their fortune, the Merriweather fortune, has gone missing. So he tosses her over. So now she has no money, and her only marketable skill, or so she thinks, is because she's been given, talk about me being the Gilded Girl, right? She's been given the Miss Too Prim and Proper Girl, right? So she had been given this castle in Chicago. And the reason I took them to Chicago is because if you were a member of the New York 400, yes, there is society in Chicago. Yes, you've got the Marshall Field, and you have Bertha Palmer, and you have all this. There's a lot of money, but New York high society, very disdainful. You would not go to Chicago. So I'm like, well, let me just take her there. Plus, I'd already done research on Chicago, so that I didn't have to do quite as much research. Because when I moved from city to city, that's a lot of work. I whipped out I even have them here, like Chicago mansions, Chicago Historic Prairie Avenue, the Pullman cars. I have all these books on Chicago. So I'm like, okay, it's going to be on Lakeshore Drive. And the reason it's on Lakeshore is because that's where Bertha Palmer, who was married to Potter Palmer, who owned the Palmer Hotel, fascinating history there. It burned down. He gifted that to Bertha as like a wedding present. It burned down in the Great Chicago Fire. He ends up rebuilding it 2 years later. And there you go. And then he starts building this mansion, this castle on the lake. So what happened after he did that is everybody from the city wanted to move there. So that gave me the plot, kind of like, well, okay, so there's this castle, but there's got to be, you have to throw danger at your heroines. Like you have to like not only uproot them from their world. So now I've yanked her out of the New York 400. She's now going to be in this, going to Chicago. And they pull up, and they thought they were going to get a cottage, is what her Aunt Adelaide had given her. And she sees this spooky old castle, and it's rumored to be haunted. And now there's unscrupulous developers, because why? Because everybody wants to emulate Mr. Palmer moving to Lakeshore. So that adds all that conflict. And then you just put it all together, and it just kind of like, sometimes like the stories just like have a life of their own. They just go off in different directions. And I mean, ferrets showed up from out of nowhere, and I was like, oh, okay, well, we're going to have some ferrets.
I love the ferrets.
And I love the ferrets. And the ravens are
ravens.
Well, that's from a true story. I have been attacked by ravens. Thank you very much.
No way.
And they remember people, don't they?
They do.
I think birds recognize people.
Yeah. We used to they had this one, when I lived in Denver, I was always they have this great trail system. And so I would always take my dog, and there was this tree this one day, and there were all these ravens in there. So I stopped to take a picture, and they must didn't like that, because then all of a sudden they think it was a cloud of ravens. And it's called an unkindness. That's how I found out they were called an unkindness, because when I got home, I'm like, I think it's a murder, of course, but what do you call ravens? Because they were big, and they chased me for quite a while.
They are.
And yes, it's an unkindness. So I had to put that in.
So that was a real experience there that you used
and also
to incorporate.
There's a lot of real experiences throughout all of my books. Like the peacocks that are in one of my books, when they attack somebody, that happened to me. That's how I got the whole thing for this series, was because of Scooby-Doo.
That's some skill. That is some skill, I have to say, to get from Scooby-Doo to this book, which is
Right?
just a delight to read.
It is. And I'm sorry. All I'm going to do is laugh today. For those of you that haven't read any of Jen's books, please do, because they're hilarious. But for this one, I don't think I stopped laughing from page 1 to page 334 or something. I don't remember where we ended, but where do you get these ideas? You have all this stuff that happens. You have the ferrets, you have the herd of goats, you have a goose, you have a haunted suit of armor.
An architect.
And even Drusilla herself, she's prim and proper, but
when I'm writing a book, it unfolds like a movie in my head. It's just how my brain works. So, for example, I'm writing a new story, and I just thought it was kind of blah, this one scene that I was writing. So I was just wandering around the house, and all of a sudden I'm like, Serafina needs to be disguised as a man, and she's going to be mistaken for a member of the Dead Possum Gang, and the hero's family is going to try to shoot her. And as soon as that popped into my head, the whole chapter and it was super fast to write that. So the same thing, with the goats, I needed something. So they're approaching this castle they were not expecting, and it is creepy. And so what are they going to encounter when they walk in there? Well, I wasn't going to have the suits of armor move just quite yet. So I thought
it's probably best.
Yes, right? So I thought, well, and then I don't know, goats just sprang to mind. And I was like, that'd be hilarious if they're being chased by goats. And then there has to be a goose that thinks it's a goat. And so there you have it. And then I just write. And then but it takes me, so I do 7 edits as I'm writing a book, like a first draft, say, right? So I write the first draft, it is bare bones. And I have to remind myself, this is not going to be perfect. It's not going to be perfect. You just got to get all of the words on the page, get to the end, and then you go back. And then I really like the next process. I hate, right now, I hate doing the first draft stage like that. Until I get to the end, I loathe it. There's so many blank pages, and it freaks you out. I mean, it does, because you're just like, all those words have to come from my brain. And sometimes my brain doesn't want to cooperate. So, okay. But then I don't start getting really funny until about edit number 5. And then there's glimmers of what I want the scene to be, especially because I almost do a Lucille Ball, almost slapstick comedy in places. It can be physical comedy as well. So not until about 5 do I start really fine tuning that. And then I send it off to my editors after I do that 7th thing. So my last step, I'll show you guys. I have something here. I was doing this other thing. So this is what I print out. So this was actually from a line, and this was a developmental edit that I just recently did for In Pursuit of Civility. So I had sent it in to my editors after I did my 7 steps. They then go through it, and then they tell me everything they think is wrong.
Thank you.
It's so annoying because their suggestions are spot on. So, I would never publish anything without a whole editing team. So they'll tell me things because I can get a little carried away. I'm sure you find that hard to believe, but sometimes, I'll get on
shocked, shocked.
Right? I'll be on a comedic riff, and I might just go on it for too long. So they'll be like, Jen, we think you can cut this down. Now, in this book, A Lesson in Propriety, there is a scene there that I made short. And they came back and they said, we want you to add another chapter and expand on this scene because this is hilarious. So in order to do that, I then have to cut somewhere else because I don't want my book to be 120,000 words. I mean, I'm a wordy author, and everybody knows I always say, why use 1 word when I can use 90? But, but I try to calm that down. So then what happened? So I rewrite this book, right? And then and then I send it in. Then they send me, it comes back, and after that, I'll do the line and copy edits. And that's just where it's fine tuning. What I have to make sure, because I write comedy and I can have a comedic riff, it's not just a one-liner. You can have comedy that starts at the beginning of a chapter and it'll weave its way through. They'll refer to it in conversation. And then all of a sudden it goes to something else, and then it comes back. And then you have the ending of it is at the end. Well, if during the editing process, any of that gets cut out, it doesn't make any sense. The humor is going to fall short. And that's very easy to get cut during the editing process. And I understand that. I cannot be an easy author to edit. So then I've been with Bethany House for so long that we just, I go and I put it back and they know why I'm putting it back and then everything's fine, and it's not like a lot of people think that when you write for a traditional publishing house that, that the editors get the final say, and that they change your work. And that's just not really true. I mean, they just give me fabulous suggestions. My editors are part of my team and our goal is to produce the best Jen Turano book that we're capable of getting out on the market. So that's what the goal always is.
This is actually very fascinating and encouraging. Like it's encouraging to me, who tends to be a bit, of a perfectionist. And so to hear the creative process is really going draft over draft and reworking and not holding things so tightly initially, because it evolves and grows, which is really great to hear.
Yeah. And I know like a lot of writers who are just starting the process, they're and I've been in the business for a long time. They really want to hold on to the idea that every word is precious, and it's not. Like you have to get to the point where when I was trying to break into the market, I wrote 7 manuscripts and it took me 5 years to find an agent. But the thing is that my writing was not it wasn't what I call publishing worthy. And really, that is your goal. You need to be able to produce a story in such a way that you can expect someone to pay you money for it. So, and I learned something on every single manuscript that I wrote, different genres. I perfected the query letter like you would not believe. And then what I didn't know is that and this was right around the time when emails were becoming prevalent, because a couple of manuscripts I literally had to print out and send to people who requested them, which that was expensive. But they would send me, agents would call me and they would give me suggestions, which I didn't realize was weird, but they saw something quirky in my work, So instead of getting the standard thanks, but no thanks, they would be, I mean, some of them were blistering. There was one agent she's like, your query letter was fabulous, but wow, was I disappointed after I got past chapter 2, because I had distraction from plot and I also had a point of view problem. But she told me that. So after I got over the initial, well, that was harsh. I was like, well, you know what? She's exactly right. So it taught me and then I had another agent who called me and she was making a salad and drinking wine. I'll never forget it. And the longer she got, the more wine but she was so helpful. I never ended up signing with her, but she was like, you have a point of view. She goes, you have a POV problem. And I'm like, I'm like, I keep seeing that. Agents keep telling me that, but I really don't understand. So she said, pull your manuscript up and I'm going to explain it to you. And she set it off in such a way that a light bulb went off and I was like, oh, well, that's what they're talking about. So then I was able to correct the problem. So what I would say to aspiring writers is, you have to take the criticism and you have to actually listen to it. And people who are in the business, they know what the market wants, and if you're fortunate enough to get that advice, especially if you hear it more than once, I mean, I was hearing that POV thing a lot. So clearly I had a problem. And then, then hopefully, you can progress and you can grow your craft. And then I finally got to the point where I did produce a book that was worthy of gaining me an agent, and now with working with these editors for so many years at Bethany House, I literally, when I'm writing now, I tend to do those comedy riffs, right? And I'm typing, and here's the ferrets, and this is something else that ferrets could do, or let's have the ferrets do that. And then it's literally one of my agents, I can hear him sitting right here, this is not a book about ferrets, Jen. You might want to wrap that up. So you do. So it is a process, but it is a team effort, and a lot more goes into producing those books that hopefully readers will enjoy. I worry about that all the time,
Well, Jen, I really enjoy the character development that you have in your stories. And Chris and I were talking right before our interview. Chris, you had some great questions, especially about Drusilla.
So for Drusilla, the thing that struck me is she is strong. She is very willing to set aside the norm. Okay, their money is gone, happens right away at the beginning, so we're not giving anything away. But she wants to make sure her and her sister survive, and of course her mom too. So where do you think that comes from? Because when you meet her mom, Irma, it doesn't seem to be from mom.
Drusilla more than her sister Annalise. She actually is more like her late father. She has a very analytical mind, but because she was born female instead of male, her father never promoted that or allowed her to become involved with the business, because if he had, their lives would have been a lot different, because their man of affairs would not have been able to take off with all of their fortune. So she was really more like her late father. But back in those days, of course, if they were born a female, it didn't matter how smart they were. So
right.
That's kind of where I was going with her. I consider myself a very strong woman. I'm very self-sufficient. I always have been. So I'm going to write what I know. And really the majority of my friends are very independent, strong women. And so I took a lot of classes about the suffrage movement and stuff when I was in college. Those were like my electives. And even though it wasn't the norm, there were a lot of really strong women back in the Gilded Age. Hetty Green, she was called the Witch of Wall Street. She was brilliant.
Yeah.
She made millions and millions of dollars. There was a woman invented, and I can't think of her name right now, but she invented the washing machine. And there were just all these inventions that women did. They never got the credit for them. They were never on, in any of the, the New York Tribune or anything like that. It was always the men. So maybe it's kind of my way of putting women back in history, that like to give them some of the credit that they should have been due in the first place. Because, and then there's also the one book I wrote, Flights of Fancy. I think her name was Isadora. So that was actually inspired when I read a book on Consuela and Alva Vanderbilt. And the book always bothered me. Alva Vanderbilt, that is the book why I started writing in the Gilded Age, because I was not that well versed in the Gilded Age. I did not learn about the Gilded Age hardly at all when I was in grade school on up through high school. Covered a little bit in the suffrage classes I took, but really I didn't know. I didn't know about all of these things. So Alva Vanderbilt was a social climber, and she wanted to get them admitted into the New York 400. And Carolyn Astor said, "You're new money." The Mr. Vanderbilt, Cornelius Vanderbilt, who had made the original fortune, he was called the Commodore. He still was known to eat peas with a knife, and he was a very harsh, crass kind of gentleman. Well, Alva set her sights on his grandson. Was going to marry him, and she did. She landed him, and so they did not have a pleasant marriage. They ended up eventually getting divorced, which was like unheard of back then. But she had this daughter, Consuelo, and so Alva decided to really cement her position within society that Consuelo had to marry a British aristocrat, and she set it up. Consuelo was forced to marry the Duke of Marlborough, and he was in love with somebody else. Consuelo was in love with somebody else, but they were forced to marry. So that bothered me. So I like to take things that I see from history and I like to twist them around. So in Flights of Fancy, Isadora's mother wants her to marry this repulsive duke, and Isadora runs away.
Repulsive.
Yeah, she runs away and she hides by taking up a position as a housekeeper. I just like, so she's a grand American heiress, and of course, plus taking her out of that world and putting her in another one. Like, not only does it provide a lot of comedic fodder, but it allows your character to grow, because they get to see the world. The people who really were New York high society, they were very sheltered from the real world. I mean, just like we see today with the ultra wealthy are so sheltered. But so it just allows me to explore some of those social, economic issues that were of the time, but to like kind of give the ladies their.
Jen, is there any one thing that you're hoping people will walk away with after reading A Lesson in Propriety?
I just always want readers to find a little bit of an escape. I think I'm really a big believer that laughter is the best medicine, and I get more letters from people who are having problems in their lives, or I get a lot of letters from terminally ill patients, and someone gives them my book, and it's just given them that little escape just into humor, and and made them laugh and made them smile, and that's really what my goal is. Just like it's just a little escape. And yeah, sometimes my plots are completely crazy and you've got just outlandish situations, but it's just all good fun.
It is, and it is a gift you give us, even if we just are flat out enjoying your books. So thank you for that. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Yes.
Thanks for saying that.
So I think we better wrap it up, because I am afraid if I ask you another question, we'll be another hour.
Exactly, because I'm chatty.
So, yeah, well, and we were helping by listening and laughing at
Love
you.
it.
So, not literally at you.
I love it.
But I enjoy this so much, Jen. I love having you come in, whether in the store here or with us on the podcast. So we appreciate your time.
Yes. Thank you
I
for
appreciate
joining
you
us on
having me.
Pages and People.
You have a great day, and we look forward to book number 2, soon to be available on bakerbookhouse.com.
Thank you so much.
So, up next, Chris and I are going to be talking with Katie Powner about her latest book, When the Road Comes Around. Katie, welcome so much to Pages and People.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
I really enjoyed the setting of your book, When the Road Comes Around. It's kind of that small town sort of dynamic that I found to be very engaging. I didn't grow up in a small town.
Okay.
So it was really, I really love the way you have that dynamic at work, and you really get to know the characters and how much of their history comes to bear on their present day experiences.
Right. When you live in a small town, especially when you grow up there, your history follows you. You can't really get a fresh start. Everybody knows what you've done, where you've been. So, there are a lot of positives to living in a small town. That's maybe a little bit of a negative. It can be good or bad, but just not being able to shake your past is something that can be difficult. Yeah.
Yes.
And in the story, Tad finds that out because his mistakes kind of follow him around and he's not able to really move on from them.
So, Katie, why don't you give our listeners a summary of what the story's about?
Yeah, we have Tad, and he's 24, and he has grown up in this small town of Grady, Montana, and he's made a lot of mistakes. He has kind of a reputation for being a troublemaker and for being kind of a failure. And so the only job he can get is at Come Around Ranch for the summer. And Come Around Ranch is owned by Dan and Anita Wilson, and they have a son who's 21 who's developmentally disabled. And so they give Tad a chance on the ranch to work there because they're believers and they believe in second chances. They believe in grace, and they think, well, let's give this kid a chance. And their limits of grace are tested through that experience. And there's lots of lessons learned, lots of growth that happens. And so I think I won't say any more than that.
I found Sam a very unique character because a lot of authors kind of shy away from having a special needs person in their book for whatever, because they're harder to write. They really are. So where in your experience did that come from? I mean, Sam is way believable. I mean, it's somebody I could know.
Yeah. First of all, I really appreciate you saying that because I spent a lot of time in prayer over Sam because that is something you want to get right. That's not something that you want to misrepresent. And that's important to me to get that right. So I'm really happy that you said that. I appreciate it. And I would say, so when I was growing up, my mom worked as an aide in the special ed room at our elementary. And so I spent a lot of time there with her after school or different, because where I lived growing up, elementary and then like middle and high school, they were on different schedules. So you get done with middle school. Well, the elementary's not out yet. So I would go there to her classroom and spend time there while I'm waiting for her to be finished. So I spent a lot of time there. And I've also spent a lot of time in nursing homes, care homes of different kinds, memory care homes. And so I would say I have a lot of experience with people of many different abilities. So that definitely, I think, played into as I was creating Sam as a character. Another thing is, like we mentioned, the thing about small towns, how there's pros and cons, right? One of the cons could be that there's less resources for medical resources, mental health resources, availability of specialists, that kind of thing. So when you live out here, when you're in more isolated areas, you will find more people who maybe just who don't have a diagnosis. They don't necessarily have a special, like, this is my condition, or, we're being treated for this. They're kind of just living their life, if that makes sense. And that's kind of how I see Sam. I specifically, purposefully didn't give him a diagnosis in the story because he never had one. He just is Sam. And everybody just knows him and that's Sam. He didn't need to have a specialist say this or that about him. And that's something that then you do find more in kind of the smaller rural areas. And so I wanted to be true to that as well. So then the last thing I would say about Sam is that he surprised me. He actually was not in the first draft of the story. He was there, but not his point of view. He was in the story, but he did not have any chapters himself at first. But as I was going along and I was drafting, I felt like there was something missing, that without his perspective, the fullness of the story just could not be achieved that I wanted. So his voice then snuck in kind of later in the process. And I'm so glad. It was a surprise to me. I'm going to admit, I was kind of surprised. I was not planning for that. I was not expecting that, but I was really pleased with it.
Yeah. And you're right. It lends that authenticity to the story.
Yeah. I can't imagine it without his voice there.
Yeah.
And that's great. That's what I want to hear for sure. Yeah.
Well, good. You know, we're editors, you can tell.
Well, we definitely have our opinions anyway.
That's probably a better way to put that.
Yeah. But I was, I like Tad a lot too. And I am curious to hear more about your inspiration for a character and how he develops in this story.
So similar to what I said before, in a small town, you do have a hard time, starting fresh, or getting another chance because everybody already knows all the ways you've screwed up. The whole town knows about it. Or you maybe didn't even, but if your parents did, that's so-and-so's kid. That is something that happens, And so I've always lived in small towns. I grew up on a dairy farm that was right outside of a town of about 100 people. And then now the town that I live in now has about 2,500 people. So way bigger than that, but still very small. No high schooler can get away with anything because then somebody's parent's going to see them and call the other parent and say, I saw your kid speeding down the Dry Creek Road. And it happens all the time.
Yep.
So that's Tad, that's his experience. That's who he is. He's been that kid. Everybody knows his dad and what has happened to him. Everyone knows about Tad's mistakes. But the real first origins of where Tad came from as a character came from my experience so I'm a foster parent, and I've been a foster parent for about almost 10 years now. And you run into a lot of variety of people doing that. And one of the people, and I never actually met him, but he had taken in a boy that was a baby who he believed was his because the mother said he was, and he was caring for him. And then a paternity test showed he was not the father of the baby.
Wow.
And the state had to take him from him and brought him to me. And they brought me this baby saying he has been living with who we thought was the dad, but now he has to live with you. And that just really kind of devastated me to think of this guy who he had poured in. He'd bought in and said, okay, all right, I guess this is my kid. I'm going to take him in. I'm going to love him. I'm going to do it. I'm going to make it work. Well, let's do this, and then to be just like thrown for a loop, like, nope, sorry. And the baby's taken. And now here I have him.
Right.
That really impacted me. That really made me think. There's just a lot of questions that come, to my mind, even as a writer, when something like that happens. And I couldn't stop thinking about that guy. I don't even know his name, and what he must have gone through, and just what, the roller coaster that he had been on going through that experience. And so Tad was actually born from that happened to me, that experience, and eventually became then the character he is in that setting. But that was the seed. Yeah.
Yeah. Huh.
Which I enjoyed seeing that dynamic at work in the story, because it's not often kind of the father role of caring for being an only parent of being a very young parent and taking care of a baby. Like, I just thought it was so refreshing. And I think makes the dynamics of redemption and grace and all those themes that you pull into your story. I don't want to say too much, but I like. Yeah, you were right, Wade. Are there any particular themes that you were hoping would come forward through your storytelling?
Well, I think for this story particularly, that idea of just grace, when I think of God's grace is unlimited, right? And so our grace towards each other should also be unlimited, but we're human. And so for us, a lot of times it's not, we'll extend grace, but only to a certain point. And then you kind of hit that point where you're like, okay, you've had your chance, but when we really think about it, Jesus never reaches that point, right? Where he's like, that's it. You've had enough chances, and thank goodness he doesn't. And thank goodness, because none of us would be here if, we would all be in big trouble if he did. So that idea just really, I think, going back to foster care, that is just that same idea of just over and over and over having to give chances and chances and chances and wanting to say, I'm done with this, or this person, you want to write them off. You want to say, you've had enough chances. But then you think, well, Jesus never did that to me, And so I've learned a lot about grace, I feel, from foster care. And that was just something then that I really wanted to explore in the story. Like, where are those limits to grace as humans that, how many chances do we give? And so Dan and Anita in the story, they are believers and they are tested in that way. And that was very intentional.
Yeah, they definitely were. Anita was an interesting character to me because I know when I first started reading the book, she was almost too perfect. Not in a horrible way that you're like, oh, I'm never going to believe this story. But that's what it felt like to me. Like, you're always praying and you're doing this and you're cheering on, Tad and, but as your story goes, she becomes, well, me,
Yes.
and I love that you did that because it just adds that, again, that aspect of the story that you don't always get in a story, that your characters are very human.
Very relatable.
So,
yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for saying that.
Then.
Yeah.
To see them process and develop and grow through the story.
Right. And you give her, and I don't know if you want to say it or not, but you give her something, a burden to carry too. That's very personal to her.
Right.
And I don't want to give it away because it is a little bit into the stories.
Yeah. Right. I mean, and don't we all know people like that who, like you said at first, or they seem on the surface very Christian, like they're always going to church, they're prayer warriors, are upbeat maybe, and they're kind of known for being good citizens. And we know those people, but we also know that those people are all struggling with their own things. You might not see it, it might be deep or it might be very hidden, but they are all carrying their own burdens, and they have their faults as well. Even if maybe you don't see it at church on Sunday, they all have their weaknesses as well, and then, and like you said, then Anita, I needed her over time to reveal, that she wasn't perfect. And so, and I appreciate you saying that.
So there is a character that goes along with Tad that I found fascinating, TJ. And I was surprised by that character because, again, you gave TJ a lot of characteristics that were very interesting. I know, and TJ, you meet right away in the beginning, and I'll tell everybody, it's a horse.
It's a horse.
Yeah. And it was just like, and I love when animals are in books anyways, because it just,
Me too.
It's
There are great ones in this one too.
Yeah.
I don't even want to talk about the other one. I make me cry. Where do you, is your background with horses like that too? Or is this something that you had to do a little more research on?
So good friends of ours actually run the Breakaway Youth Ranch, which is not far from where we live. And that is a ranch where they take in largely rescue horses or horses that just people couldn't care for them anymore. Like maybe they were elderly or just different things. They come upon these horses in lots of different ways. And then they programs for at-risk kids, especially in the summer. I mean, it's Montana, so you can't do a lot in the winter, but over the summer, they have programs where the kids come, they match them up with a horse. And the child learns to like brush the horse, to clean their feet. They learn how to saddle them. Then eventually they learn how to lead them, how to lunge them, and how to ride them. And it's such a wonderful program. And I was fortunate enough to have a small part in as they were starting out. I helped train some of the horses back in the early days of when they were starting, like they were trying to get their nonprofit status and they were trying to start their ranch. And that was such a great experience. And so that was really the inspiration for bringing in kind of the horses and that healing aspect of having horses around. I really wanted to talk about that, in the story, because it's so true. I think that God made horses to work, but also to heal. And I wanted that to be part of the story.
No, I'm glad you brought it in there because A, it works so beautifully in the story, but B, it's neat to tell people those sort of stories.
Right.
Like what somebody thinks of as a story of a horse that, I even hate to say it, needs to be put down because he's troublesome.
Right.
Has a second life. And so,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really liked him. He was just kind of fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I think all the horses were like, I thought these characters could really be developed even more because they definitely have characters.
Yeah.
Maybe you should write a little animal book.
Yeah. We could have a little side story that just follows the horses and yeah.
Yes, especially given all of the guests that come to the ranch.
Right.
Oh my.
Yeah.
I'm liking the horses and the animals more than some of these visitors.
Isn't that the truth? Anybody that works with the public.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's very true.
Make everybody a puddle. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
So where do you get all these ideas? I mean, you have written on a huge variety of human issues in all your
Right.
books. And
Right.
so where is your ideas coming from?
Yeah. Well, that's a great question. And, I've already said just today, talking with you about several things that came straight from my life experience, or friends of mine or whatever. And I would say that is probably the vast majority of where my ideas and my storylines or even scenes come from, is from real life. And I didn't really expect that when I started writing novels, because I thought you have to make it up, right? It's like made up. And I'm like, hey, I almost maybe shouldn't say this, that I'm like actually not really making very much up. So I don't know, maybe I'm not a very good, I'm not that good of a storyteller. I'm just using what's already there. I'm not even coming up with this stuff most of the time. It's just some of the scenes and stuff, they'll come straight from the local newspaper, or like my husband works at the Ace Hardware, right? And so who does he see in a week? Every single person in town, right? And so, he's telling me stories all the time. My brother, he's the garbage man up in Cutbank. And so where do you think I got some stories from Sleeping Grass, right? It's from him.
Yeah.
And so I don't make that stuff up. I just use what's given to me.
See, now we can all write, right?
Yeah. So I think the key is just like to be always kind of aware, and like thinking of it as a storyteller, because everybody has this stuff going on around. Everyone meets interesting people. Everybody has interesting things happen and has friends who experience this or that. The key is to be aware of it and be like, oh, that's interesting. I should write that down. Or how does that fit in, with this? Or what if I put this character with this scene and put them together, So that's really, I feel like really all that I'm doing is putting together all the pieces of my life and then writing them down.
Well,
So
Katie, you make it sound so simple. I'm still not convinced it's quite that simple.
You're just reading her diary.
Yeah, basically.
I think there's still a lot more craft that goes into what you're doing. But I appreciate
But there is a lot of
yeah.
time. I will say that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that explains why your stories work so well. They're just us. And they give me a chance to walk in somebody else's shoes. I was not kidding, just like a half hour ago talking to a customer about a couple different books. And she was asking me about books in the store. And I said, what I look for the most, I mean, and this isn't the complete answer, but what I look for the most in a book is, can I learn something? can I walk in somebody's shoes that gives me their perspective on the story? So when I do meet that real person that you are, I understand you a little more.
Right.
And
And
I
maybe
think
you have a
that's,
little more compassion,
yep,
you know, a little empathy because you're like, okay, I can actually understand this person.
yeah. And I want to know their history before I try to judge them. You know,
Right.
well, why are you acting that way? Well, there's
Right.
this reason. I mean,
There's
Tad
lots of
acted,
reasons why. Yeah.
Tad was the way he was because his
Yeah.
father was the way he was,
Right.
you know?
And then you give
Yes.
us a glimpse into some of the
Yep.
dynamics that went into his father's situation,
Right.
Yeah.
which is like,
Right.
No,
okay,
I
yeah.
understand that story a little better.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So,
Yeah.
I also like the fact that I was telling Chris this earlier. I really appreciate the fact, Katie, that you are able to give us a full story, but not fill in all of the blanks. Like there's openness to the end of the story. And Chris
Right.
brought up a great point. What did you tell me, Chris? What you said to me.
I'll see if I got it right. It's because I want to write the ending. I want to know
Yes.
in my head, oh, I have Tad doing this, and somebody else might have Tad over here. You know,
Right.
I
And
love that.
that's exactly why I like to leave it open-ended, because each person is going to have their own need for what that they need to have happen. You know, for wherever you're at in your life, you might need to think that this is what happens next. You know, like, because for you, that's what makes, you know, it would make me happy to think that Tad does this. Well, so I don't want to ruin that by saying this is what happens. I want you to have that chance to say, well, this is what I want to see happen. And so then you can walk away believing that, and somebody else can walk away believing something else. And that's okay too, because I want to bring you to where the end of the story is really just the beginning of the real story. And then that's where you take it yourself and do whatever you need to do with it.
Love
And
that
that's why I don't
statement.
write sequels.
Even though we really want you to.
I know. We were wondering.
And a lot of people ask me, oh, is there going to be, every time I talk to a book club or something, they ask, well, is there going to be a sequel for any of the books? And I always say no. And that's why, is because you can never meet every expectation. Everyone has some idea of what they want to see happen. So lots of people are going to be disappointed. No matter what I choose to do with a sequel, you're going to disappoint people. And so I prefer to just leave it. I just kind of leave it laying there. It's like a gift, you know, you open your hands and you leave it. Here's a gift for you. And then it's up to you, the reader, to take that and decide what you want to do with it.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah.
I just think that's so cool.
It is. I feel like we are being invited to participate with you in the story of these characters.
Yeah.
And that is a gift for us. So I like
Yeah.
that. And I think the type of story that you're telling really lends itself. And I think it's more transformative personally for the reader.
Well, because this is what I have experienced as a reader. So not talking about my writer side anymore. As a reader, if I read a book where all of the ribbons are tied up in a bow at the end, let's say, I can enjoy that for sure and be like, that was a great book. But then I also can really easily set it aside because it's finished. There's closure.
Right.
And so I'm like, this is done. And then I set it aside and I just move on to the next thing. When you have a story that doesn't tie up all the bows, then you tend to carry it with you because you're still thinking about it. You have questions about it. You wonder, well, I wonder if they ever did this or if they ever found the whatever. And so that's why I really like books that are open-ended at the end, because then you keep them with you and they take it, you take them with you.
Yeah, and you can have these discussions with the other readers, and you know, whether they like the book the same way as you did or not, when you get to that end together, you can say, so what do you think?
Yeah.
That's interesting. You know, and it lends itself to conversation.
Because sometimes you'd be really surprised that someone else will be like, well, I think that this is what would happen next. And that might be completely different than what you thought.
That's not right.
You're like, you might be like, I never even thought about that happening, you know? But I like that. I like that.
Yep, I do too. That's, you know, and that's the reader world. Being a reader and a writer, you see it from both perspectives. That, you know, readers, that's what we talk about the most. What about the ending? Did you like the ending?
Yeah, did you like the ending?
And that can make or break a book, to be honest with you.
Right. No, that's very true.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and to be honest with you, leaving them open-ended like that is very brave, because you don't see a lot of authors that leave them so open-ended.
Yeah.
Like
and I do get pushback on that. And some people they don't appreciate it. But often when I talk to them about why, they usually change their mind and say, you know, that really makes sense. And they can appreciate it more. So I I agree with you that it is sort of a risk, but I just keep talking about my reasons why, I'll keep sharing about that and hopefully people will come around.
Sure that your fans all love it, so I'm not too worried about it. And like I said, those are some of my favorite endings. I'm with you. I don't mind the little bow at the end of the story, but I love, because life isn't perfect
Right.
at the end of a book, because when our next chapter is written, there's more trouble ahead.
Yeah. I mean, because just think about how much more life there is to live. So
Yeah,
for all the
exactly.
characters. So who knows what's coming next?
Yeah. So, yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Sue. That was a good question. That's a very good question. So I've always wanted to ask you, have you ever thought about writing in a different genre?
That's a good question too. Technically, my book that comes out next April with Kriegel is technically in a different genre because it's women's fiction, which these 5 books with Bethany House are actually general contemporary. So, but women's fiction and general contemporary are they kind of overlap, I would say. So they're pretty similar. So I don't know if that really counts as a different genre. So as far as like an actual different genre, I have in the past written a couple speculative stories and they've never been published. They're just sort of, in the drawer. But I think that is something that would interest me in the future. This wouldn't be, I'm not talking about like fantasy or sci-fi type stories. It would be more like, futuristic or just alternate type stories.
Sure.
Because I just really like the idea of what if this or what if that, and exploring how different the world could be, but then at the same time, how people are still the same no matter what. I really like that idea,
Yeah.
So you could be in a totally different alternate version of history or whatever, but people are people. They're still the same.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so that does really interest me. So someday maybe.
Yeah. Oh, well, we'll look for that.
Oh,
Maybe it's speculative. That's interesting.
So what would be some differences that you feel as an author has been your experience in writing this women's fiction? Is that what? Yeah. Writing that type of book. What kind of departure is that from what you've been doing?
So for me, I mean, the main, most obvious difference is in a women's fiction, the main characters, the point of view characters are all women. And in my general contemporary, there's always at least one male point of view. And so to me, that sort of takes it out of the purely women's fiction genre because you have male main characters. And so in my women's fiction story, there's 2 women and they're the main point of view characters. And then it also focuses a little bit more on just the relationships, like the personal growth in relationships and personal type of growth, as opposed to, I think with the general contemporary, you have maybe more of a broader perspective. It's like more kind of community, social like perspective, especially if you think of like my Sleeping Grass book or something that's very much focused on sort of the community as a whole. And the women's fiction narrows maybe a little down to more specific interpersonal women's relationships. So I would say to me, that's kind of the difference between them. But like I said, they do kind of overlap. They are.
So would you be following the lives of these characters over a longer period of time or not necessarily?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, in this particular story that's coming out in April, it does span a longer time period than all my general contemporary books take about 3 months. They cover about 3 months out of a person's life. This women's fiction one covers about 6 months, so twice as long. Because I think because of that ground you're covering in that relationship development and like that interpersonal stuff, the interplay, then you are needing maybe the longer time. So yeah, that's a really good question.
Is that it's contemporary? Because I know women's fiction can be. Yeah.
It's contemporary. Yep. And it's about a foster mom and a bio mom who kind of form a tenuous relationship based on the baby that they both love and want for their own. Yeah. And the question is, who is the best mother for this child? And they both need to wrestle with that question. And obviously that's comes from a lot of personal experience. So it's a really important story to me because of my personal experience that I want people to read more stories about realistic foster care situations. You do see foster care in books sometimes, but a lot of times it's sort of gimmicky, not necessarily authentic. So
Or very negative.
Or it's very
know.
negative, which is not accurate. There is a lot of negative foster care stuff going on, obviously, just like within anything, anywhere, ever. But for the most part, foster parents are just regular people trying to help the best they can. And I really wanted to show that. And that's what that story is about. So
I'm looking forward to it. You said in the spring?
Yep, next April. So, yeah.
Awesome. Good.
Yeah.
We'll make sure that's on my TBR list.
Yeah,
That's not getting any shorter.
Well, you have till April to get it figured out.
I'll get it read as fast as I can. I have orders. So, well, is there anything else that you can think of that you would like to share about this book?
I think that I would just share that, I mean, and this has sort of been covered, but just the idea that the people in this story are really just ordinary people and they're doing ordinary things. You know, there's nothing earth-shattering or out of this world, you know, or even, you know, like a lot of times you'll see like people being heroic maybe or things like that in books. And there's not really anything like that. It's more like people quietly going about their lives, but how that actually is a really big deal, if that makes sense.
It does. That's a good way to sum up this book. And actually all your books. That's the amazing thing about it. So where can we find you?
Yeah, I would love for people to visit katiepowner.com. Because from there, then that's where you can find all the other links to social media or to the books or to different retail sites, to my author services, to my blog. All of it's connected to katiepowner.com. So that's a great.
Well, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks
Unless
so
you
much
had
for
something
having me.
else, Sue.
I think this has been fabulous. Thanks so much, Katie. It's really been a pleasure to meet you and talk with you and find
Thank
out
you.
more of the story behind the story.
Yeah, I appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Pages and People. We want to give a big thanks again to our guests Jen Turano and Katie Powner for sharing their humor, heart, and insight with us today. If you loved hearing their stories, be sure to pick up A Lesson in Propriety and When the Road Comes Home. Both are 30% off right now at bakerbookhouse.com. And don't forget, we're right in the middle of our 6-day customer appreciation sale, happening now through October 25th. It's the perfect time to stop by the store or shop online and save on books, Bibles, and gifts. October is also Pastor Appreciation Month, and Baker Bookhouse has everything you need to show a little gratitude, from thoughtful new releases and inspiring titles to gift cards or even a simple thank you card. For upcoming author events, book signings, and community gatherings, visit the events page at our website, bakerbookhouse.com/pages/events. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow, share, and leave us a review. And join us next time for more stories, more authors, and more ways faith and imagination meet at Baker Bookhouse. Until next time, keep reading, keep reflecting, keep connecting with stories that shape us.